Welcome, listeners, to Menelation 669, a podcast dedicated to my ADHD ramblings. If you like random topics spoken by a random person, this is your safe space. I am your host, Mina, reporting from Mothership Earth, and today, guys, we are going to deep dive right into what the hell did I come across on Reddit, part 2, Electric Boogaloo. Like I said before, like I've mentioned, once a month at least, or maybe once every 2 months, I would like to, find a really weird Reddit, like subreddit, and talk about it. And, the possibilities are quite endless because if you don't know by now, Reddit is a black hole, a wormhole of just very useful information that I utilize all the time, and also really cursed random shenanigans. It is the pinnacle of humanity. If aliens ever touch down Earth, just show them Reddit. They'll leave. They're like, yeah, we're too far gone as a species, as a civilization. Just let's try another planet. So anyways, I'm scrolling through Reddit like any other person, right? At nighttime, before bed, it's just what I like to do. Look at cute little dog pictures, whatever, like a Facebook mom. Read my horror stories as per usual. I just want to look for weird shit. I'm just thinking, okay, March is literally, we're going to be at the end of March, basically, this week. So that's crazy. April's is coming. I wish this was an April Fool's joke, honestly, but it's not, right? The internet is cursed. I'm scrolling. I'm trying to find just bizarre, obscure subreddits that I could talk about that interest me. Maybe talk about rocks. I love rocks. And I'm not talking about crystals and all that, whatever. More power to them, but I like to call them rocks. You can call them crystals, whatever. Anyways, I come across this really weird thing. And I don't know how to really start the pod because it is... It's just so... It took the breath out of me, really. Because I'm like, what the fuck is this subreddit? Let me get into it. It started off with me coming across people talking about this one peculiar subreddit. I'm like, okay, this could be interesting. Let's see what the tea is, right? I'm investigative. I need to know. I go down this rabbit hole. Fed legs. That's a subreddit. Fed legs. I'm sitting here like, what the fuck even is that? All right. What is fed legs? But before we get into fed legs, we got to get down into the rabbit hole, right? Because welcome to the pod. If you don't know by now, every episode is just a chaotic mess of my ramblings on things that I want to talk about. And today we are going to talk about fed legs, aka from Jim the Feeder. So now you're sitting there, right? Like I was. Jim the Feeder, ? Feeder. We all know what a feeder is, right? Is this going to be another really cursed fetish post? And unfortunately, guys, I did not see this coming. I thought, with the scat thing, let's let it be done right there. Let's just nip it in the bud. No. Welcome to the pod. There's another weird subreddit about a fetish that I came across. So you're thinking fed legs, like fed, like the feds, like what's going on? That's what I thought, right? Then basically, Jim the Feeder is the main character, the MC of today's story. Jim, right? I'm like, okay, let's click on Jim the Feeder / Jim the Feeder. He has his own whatever. I click it. His bio says, I invented /r/ fed legs as an experiment, and then it kind of got away from me. That's his bio. And I'm like, okay, so the account is basically, I'm scrolling through, his comments, his posts, and basically it's Jim responding to a lot of comments all over Reddit. Kind of vague, let's just at this point, I'm like, let's just go to FedLegs, right? Like the actual subreddit FedLegs, because the answers have got to be there. Because at this point in my investigation, all I know is he's responding to a lot of comments on other, like mainly slash FedLegs, like the community FedLegs. And I'm like, okay, so I don't think at this point I can make an educated guess from what I am seeing, briefly scrolling through the comments. There's nothing about the feeder fetish. So, check that off. We're safe. Are we, though? Are we safe at this point? So, let's click right onto FedLegs. I'm there. FedLegs. Let's read the bio. This is a subreddit dedicated to the satirical, how the fuck you pronounce that word? Satire, basically. Dystopian world of Dr. Fedleg, a mad artist gone rogue with the goal of turning every woman's leg yellow by means of his permanent yellow paint. So I'm sitting here like, okay, so I thought FedLegs had to do something with the feds and legs. Maybe there's some weird fetish out there with guys particularly liking legs from federal agents. But then Jim the Feeder came up, and I'm like, okay, this is feeder content. Oh God, right? Like you can just search feeder, and there's a plethora of information. You'll learn very quickly what that is. But no, so I'm like, FedLeg. So this is Dr. FedLeg, an artist, a mad artist, who's painting women's legs or yellow. And I'm like, what? How weird is this gonna get weirder? So I'm scrolling, just a brief scroll. I'm kind of scared to see what I see, because I do have the not safe for work tag. Like, I prefer not to see those posts on Reddit because I would like to keep my eyes clean and my brain cleansed. But so there's some posts that are, blurred. Whatever, I'm not going to click on those. I'm scared. But basically the sub is filled with women in clothes. There's some weird shit on there as well, but mostly women with their legs painted yellow. So I'm like, okay, this has got to be the most niche fetish there is, right? Because it cannot get more specific than this. What do you mean by women with yellow legs? Like, how is this something that can make somebody happy right down there? It doesn't make any sense. The sub itself, 6.9k members, so that's, it's not the biggest community, but there's still almost 7,000 members, 7,000 people who have joined this. It was created September 28th, 2015. So, put that in perspective. That was like 2 years before I graduated high school. So there you go, folks. At this point, I was thirsting for the lore. Someone was cooking here, right? Some dude, Jim the Feeder, made this FedLeg subreddit, and there's lore to it. Like, it's not just a simple inflation fetish. You know what I mean? Like, there's a story behind this. I'm going to read to you the lore, right? This poor man, Jim, didn't think that his subreddit was going to get this big, because if you're just throwing like your, little story out there, you don't expect it to blow up, right? Here he is, this poor man, Jim. He had to make an updated, huge post, the lore explanation, basically, because he did not foresee the community expanding to how it got. So without further ado, guys, let us get into the fucking lore of Dr. Fedlegs, I guess. Anyways, Fedleg explanation, updated due to expanding community, right? This was submitted 6 years ago, by the way, by Jim himself. Charles Fed Ostrog, CEO of Ostrog Achievements, more commonly known in his universe as Dr. Fedleg, a man with a vision and mission to create a perfect world. So I'm like, Okay. So pretty much that's like the only sentence that I read, and I'm like, full send it. We have to talk about this because what the hell is going on? There's an actual story, right? Continuing, this includes solving crisis after crisis, saving the planet's sentient and non sentient creatures, and to restore what he believes to be modesty to those who live on the Earth. Dr. Fedleg believes the women on the planet have lost just that. Provocative clothes seem to be treated as casual nature to them: short dresses, skirts, shorts, and low cut tops. He is determined to restore order and has devised a way to do it simply, effectively, and in his mind, artistically. So from what I'm getting, right? Charles Fed Ostrog, Dr. Fedleg, he wants to make a perfect world with Amish women, basically, right? Ankle to top of your head all has to be covered. It's gonna be risky exposing your toes, but yeah, just think Amish people. Then the paragraph kind of goes to a subparagraph. This is when he's like Jim himself is talking to us. So years ago, when I was very young, I had a weird recurring science fiction-esque dream where girls who showed off their legs had them turned yellow by means of a permanent paint. I used this idea to attempt to create an extremely strange erotica, see if I could pull it off successfully. It seems as though I managed, but I've since decided to abandon the idea to explore a more useful side of the universe, one that instead can be used as a platform to explain sexual assault and political injustice. Oh, so this is great. So basically, when he was a wee lad, a little boy, in his, whatever, he had a dream about women who had yellow legs. And I guess he wanted to create an erotica from this, which is, looking at the scatter plot here, point A to point C or whatever. It's not that linear, right? Because I respect it. Like, you had a weird dream and then you're like, your first thought process is like, I want to make a spicy erotica. More power to you, brother. All right. Continuing on Jim's thought process here, Fedleg's universe can be explored in two different ways, through psychology and plot, which I have come to prefer. Still, I admit that the concept began as an attempt to create an original fetish for the world. To my knowledge, that has never been done before, and I wanted to see if I could pull it off. I succeeded, it seems, but the concept has since become about world crafting, character exploration, and parallels to the real world around me. Okay, so he basically kind of wanted... So he made this erotica. Then now he sort of is using satire to explain sexual assault and political injustices. And I guess no one on planet Earth till this day, that eventful day when he thought about his dream, no human being has ever created the fetish of women with yellow legs. So more power to you, honestly. So anyways, jumping out of his thought process, when written from a psychological perspective, Fedleg's universe should be seen as not so subtle metaphor for sexist political leaders doing good for the votes, but really being after for the power and control. Okay, so he's sort of doing like a double meaning sort of thing, right? At the center of all of this, Charles Fed Ostrog, also known as Dr. Fedleg, has a very simple and unique policy. If a woman is showing her legs, she gets them painted. No exceptions. This universe is partially inspired by the 1850 novel The Scarlet Letter. So that's really weird. Okay, this is already off to like a kind of okay start. The guy had a weird dream eons ago, and he was like, you know what, I'm just gonna make an erotica out of it. We've all been there. Guys, there's this huge wall of text, right? This man really had to put the work in to help, I don't know, explain his fetish to people, because this isn't just a simple dream anymore, right? There's complete canon lore that he has written, and there's a community that has read all of this and are creating side plots to the main story. Like there's people actively, I don't know if it's active actually to this day, but there's a lot of posts of people, creating their own side stories within the universe of this. This is crazy because what the fuck is happening, right? Because we all thought getting into this, like, oh, okay, whatever. I guess this is just a subreddit of women in yellow leggings and tights and just painted yellow legs. Like, it didn't even have to be sexual. Like, half of the posts, honestly, majority of the posts aren't even sexual. It's just literally women with yellow legs. There is a huge, there's got to be at least 11 paragraphs here on the lore. So without further ado, let's just read through it because I need to know the lore here. And you do too now. Fedleg's history. Charles Fed Ostrog was born to Harry and Chrissy Ostrog. He grew up with a younger sister, Diffidence, and to say his childhood was unpleasant would be an understatement. The siblings grew up in an extremely abusive household with a highly religious, borderline Puritan father who would verbally attack his mother and sister anytime they might, quote, step out of line. A sexist man, Harry Ostrog hated the world and was terrified of what was to come. Still, he managed to develop what could argue actually was a parental bond with Charles. The world isn't right, Harry would tell his son. We've doomed God's creation. It's up to men like us to delay the inevitable, protect Mother Nature, and punish those who mock our creators. The utopia we were destined for will never be granted to us, but that doesn't mean we can't still fight and show our Lord we're worthy of his gifts. So pause. What the hell? First of all, who's naming their younger sister Diffidence? Like, do you hate your child? Like, first of all, Charles, Harry, and Chrissy, whatever, right? Even Chrissy was spelled Krisse. That's kind of cursed, right? Diffidence? How do you come up with, like, regular names? Like Charles, and then your sister be Diffidence. Anyways, Charles learned from his father's point of view and was raised to be sexist and power-hungry as Harry. Unlike his father, though, Charles took action outside his home. He might not have been born a genius, but natural talent meant nothing to him. If he had to build himself from the ground up, he would. He sacrificed friendship, traditional fun, and at times his own health to become the best version of himself that was possible. With his hopeless childhood behind him, Charles Ostrog had grown beyond his father's pessimism. Harry saw the beginning of a once impossible utopia shaped before his very eyes. He was the father of Earth's savior. His firstborn was the perfect child. Unfortunately, the same could not be said for his other. By the time of Charles' early victories, his sister, Diffidence, has entered a stage of teenage rebellion. He would come home to find her sporting dresses, skirts, or shorts that went well against Harry's comfort zone. His father would let her know as well. Charles witnessed his aging father shout disgusting, vile things to his sister about her actions and presentation. Diffidence, who had been trying to develop immunity to the insults she received since childhood, did her best to ignore her father. A silent war raged between the father and daughter. Diffidence dressed increasingly provocatively and began coming home late into the night. Though Harry cut her off financially, locked her in her room, stole her revealing clothing, and of course continued his verbal abuse, all of this only emboldened Diffidence. She found ways to escape her room, make her own money, and bought and borrowed her own clothes. Charles's mother, Chrissy, suggested sending her away, perhaps even to military school. Charles backed her up on it, becoming increasingly uncomfortable and protective of his sister. He knew that Diffidence just wanted attention from her father and freedom to be herself. It was a phase and it would pass. Harry, however, refused, determined to keep his daughter somewhere he can keep an eye on her. So pause. So overall, right now, all we can get lore-wise from this story is classic, abusive religious father, turning his son into a younger version of himself, and then pan to the sister who's obviously gonna be the freaking slutty one going through her rebellious phase. Just typical shit right now. Typical shit thus far. Let's get back into the story. This is just my thought process right now, right? Nothing too crazy or weird is going on. This is just typical. It's a trope that we've all seen, right? So getting back on track. One night, Charles and Harry stayed up late into the night while Charles explained his company's new ideas for the Clean Water Act and his plans to help the world's oceans. They drank and laughed and celebrated what was to come for hours on end, until the door opened and diffidents attempted to sneak in. Father and son halted their celebration to get a look at what just interrupted them, and Harry dropped his glass in shock. Diffidence was standing before them in one of the shortest and most provocative dresses either man has ever seen. For a solid chunk of time, there was silence. Diffidence clearly didn't expect anybody to be awake at this time. Despite a good chunk of her life's purpose being rebellion these days, her quiet and almost timid nature showed that she wasn't in the headspace for a fight right now. Harry finally stirred. He stood up from the couch and began hobbling towards his daughter, drunk and furious. He got right in Diffidence's face, and both she and Charles braced for the slur of horrible things to start pouring out of his mouth. It never came, though. In one solid motion, Harry raised his hand and slapped Diffidence to the ground. He took off his belt and began beating her. She screamed. Charles yelled for his father to stop, but Harry didn't seem to hear him. The commotion woke his mother, who came tumbling into the room and screamed. This finally broke Harry out of his violent trance and turned towards his wife. A moment of silence passed between them before Harry turned his belt on Chrissy. He attacked and began shouting more drunken slurs, blaming his wife for allowing their daughter to turn into such a disgrace and how neither of them respected him or the word of God. So pause. What the classic trope here, ladies and gentlemen, right? The crazy Bible thumping father, the Puritan father, right? Whatever. You shouldn't even be sexualizing your daughter, right? And I get it. There should be, I don't even know the age. It's a teenage rebellion. So I can, let's just put them at high school, right? It's that age, guys. Women, technically we should be able to do everything we want, but at the same time, we're also minors at this age, teenagers. So I get it. But it just takes a dad to say, men and not just men, it could be women too, just be careful out there with what you're wearing and just be, more environmentally aware of your surroundings. You don't have to fucking beat your fucking daughter or say vile slurs to her. Come on, man. So classic trope, like I said, thus far. Fucking the guy turns to his wife and starts beating her. Like, come on. Continuing on with the story, we need to see what the fuck plays out. Because right now, I'm just like, how is this tied to women being painted yellow on their legs? So continuing the story, Charles watched in horror, seeing what he momentarily hoped was a new side of his father. But he knew that wasn't true. Harry Ostrog was a horrible man, and there were millions like him out there, abusing their wives and daughters and women of all kinds. This wasn't the utopia that Harry had taught his son about. It couldn't be. Charles took action and lunged at Harry, quickly taking him away from his mother and subduing him. Harry looked at his son with hatred and sadness in his eyes. He had been betrayed. He struggled and attempted to fight back, but Charles's strength and age easily overpowered his own. He was no match for his son, even when he dragged him over to the phone so that he can call the police. His mother and sister were in too much shock and pain to do anything. The police arrived as fast as they could to take Harry away. Charles followed them down to the station to give a statement and refused to bail his father out. The months that followed changed everything. Now a wealthy man, Charles used his resources to fight on behalf of his mother and sister and ensure that Harry Ostrog would serve the long prison sentence that felt justified. The night changed Charles's outlook on the world. His utopia began to crumble, not literally, but emotionally. It mattered less and less. What did his accomplishments matter if things like this were going to happen? He realized he could have prevented all of this, but he stood by and allowed diffidence to march a rebellion into the household. He stood by while his father's true nature started to unleash itself. Yes, he saw Harry in a new light, but even that had always been who his father was. He had kept it reasonably under control. Violence never even entered the picture until Diffidence's actions brought out that horrific side of him. Her desire to get a rise out of him through revealing herself broke them all. Charles began to believe that humans couldn't be trusted. Sexuality and religion, two of humanity's greatest driving forces, brought out the worst in them, men especially. This meant it wasn't the fault of the women. If it was a human nature. Humans either wanted to be with a woman for how she presented herself or punish her for the same reasons. The realization came as sort of an epiphany to Charles. This had to be the answer. His father had been right after all, just for the wrong reasons. The utopia could still stand as long as drastic steps were taken. The next step, restoring a sense of modesty to the world. Women didn't need to be punished for revealing too much of themselves. They needed to be saved from men like his father, rapists and abusers. Pause. So, interesting. So it took kind of a weird turn, right? So Charles, the son, saw how horrible Harry was, made this realization emotionally. Women, he wanted to, be on the women's side, right? Fuck the men, men are pigs, whatever. And that was his new, I don't know, like he said, epiphany. I have a bad feeling though, right? Because so far there has been no mention of women in Yellow Lake. So I feel like this is going to take a turn for the worst because he wanted to bring a sense of modesty to the world. Kind of suspect. Let's finish off the story. Charles knew that what he wanted would be much too hard to enforce, a law that changed the entire fashion industry. No more revealing clothing. His projects had been welcome to the world thus far because he barely required any action of people outside of them. Humanity didn't like having its life disrupted, and a literal law calling for women to cover up would only lead to rebellion from people like his sister. The thought made him angry. He was trying to help them, and they weren't going to let him. They were going to ruin his utopia all because they wanted to show themselves off. Months were spent on Charles's new project as he worked in solitude, trying to come up with a grand scheme that would help everything make sense. What he ended up developing blew his own mind, not because it was complicated, because it was ridiculously simple. ... Paint. Yes, the prized invention of the great Charles Ostrog ended up being nothing revolutionary. He refused to reinvent the wheel because there wasn't any need to. His solution was simple. Paint. Bright yellow paint to be exact. A permanent paint that would sure catch the eye of anyone who looks at it. These girls desired attention, and he planned on forever giving it to them. He thought out very carefully where to apply the paint. He didn't wish to strip a woman to gain access to her entire body. That would make him a sexual offender, a rapist, and an abuser, but just like his horrible father. At this point, he was blinded to the truth. Needless to say, breasts would be out of the question, and arms would be too boring. At last, Charles decided to focus his attention on the woman's legs, a very feminine feature that also happens to be the strongest part, quote-unquote muscle-wise, of women. This decision allowed Ostrog to treat his project as an utopian art, forcibly painting the legs of women he saw inappropriately dressed while making a statement as clear as possible. So, pause. Like I said, it turned for the worst because, I get it. It was in its innocence. The guy was like, "Oh God, I saw my mom and sister getting abused by my misogynistic, sexist dad. So I want to help women." So I get that point of view psychologically, but it takes a turn for the worse because now he's like, we have to cover them up, which I don't think is the answer because at the end of the day, we should just be able to do anything we want with our bodies and not be, sexualized for it. Men too. Fucking if you want your nip nops out, your balls out, whatever, just don't do it in the presence of children. I'm not going to get into it. Like I said, there's a whole political, aspect of that conversation that I'm not going to get into. The story-wise, though, weird. He didn't want to be a sexual offender, rapist, or abuser, but he's going to force women to put permanent paint on their legs. So you're an abuser of some kind, right? I mean, what the hell is happening? So the last paragraph, and thus his reign of terror truly begins. In order to accomplish his task effectively, Ostrog decides to take a very medieval, cost-effective approach and has his patients, quote unquote, tied to operation tables, each wrist and ankle bound in separate restraints. The table is cushioned and a pillow is placed under the girl's head to give her a good view of what's happening. Above her will always be a mirror, so there is no escape from reality. As harsh as this punishment is, he makes sure it's always done without harm and quote unquote peacefully. He wishes to save these women from themselves before needing to be saved from an abuser. The years go on, and he loses touch with the world he once set out to save. It's his utopia, and he will treat it as such. And as the years go by, he holds in the back of his mind that what he's doing is right, but it begins to lose sight of what made him start his path in the beginning. He becomes drunk on power and righteousness. He's not a hero. He's a dictator, a crime lord that humanity allows him to be because he did in fact save them all from the terrible consequences of their actions once before. The way Ostrog sees his mission is one of assistance, forcing these women to either cover up or expose themselves to the world, marked as victims and sluts. Their legs are hungry for attention, so he feeds it to them, naming his outlandish process feeding their legs, quote unquote. Charles Fed Ostrog becomes much more commonly known to the world as Dr. Fedleg. So, this is weird. I mean, my initial thought process thus far, reading this for the first time fully, is so bizarre because I thought he didn't want women to be abused and he didn't want women to be, victims of horrific crimes, which I respect, but then it's like twisted in his mind of how he goes about it, because now he's like forcing women to cover their legs in yellow paint because they're quote unquote asking for it, like at the attention. Doesn't this make him an abuser and sexist? Like the full circle, like we've come full circle. Like, yeah, you're not beating or raping women directly, but like low key, what the heck? Feeding their legs. This is what's happening. Wow. So Jim keeps going with his thought process. He says, like, the universe has gone through a few changes, all following Charles Fed Ostrog, Dr. Fedlegs. Today he follows a mafia-type boss storyline. He has a whole team of agents, all sporting yellow ribbon badges, who spend their days finding women and bringing them in. Agents who are capable of performing the leg painting procedure themselves so that productivity can increase and more women can go and undergo it. Of course, Fedleg decides who he works on personally. Still, there is no removal of clothes through the process. The woman undergoes the paint in whatever she is wearing as long as it's what landed her in the predicament in the first place. However, certain articles of clothing may be removed throughout the process, such as tall boots, so that the doctor or whichever employee is working on her can access her full legs. High socks would also be rolled down. So this is weird because I'm like, how did this become? So I guess it's like the dream became the fetish, and then the fetish became the story. This has got to be one of the weirdest human-made lore, quote unquote, whatever they created in their universe stories I have ever come across, because this is something so different, and I've never come across the classic trope of like the dad beating the wife and the slutty daughter. We've seen this, but him sort of coming full circle in his own weird diluted mind that he needed to cover up the legs of women who dress provocatively with yellow paint that is permanent. And in his, I mean, that's like abuse because he's literally kidnapping people, right? He's using his agents to go around kidnapping women who, quote unquote, are dressing provocatively. And you might be asking, so what are these, what clothing items would make a woman get kidnapped? And there's actually a list. Mini skirts, mini dresses, any dress or skirt that falls at or below the knees will not land a girl on the table. Short shorts that don't expose much of the thighs are safe. Tights and pantyhose. Fedleg is usually strict about tights, especially in the colder months, because he sees it as a woman going out of her way to show off their legs, thus earning them a spot on the table. When he paints a pair of legs in tights, the hosiery is sometimes ripped off fully or a bit in order to check to see if the paint is settling in the skin okay. It depends on the opacity of the tights. Provocative costumes / uniforms, waitresses, cheerleaders, dancers, and models. So all of these, you're going to get kidnapped on the street and you're going to get your legs painted with permanent yellow dye. What the hell? Tights? So, in his weird, fucked up head, he thought, I'm helping these women, right? I'm not going to be an abuser like my dad. I'm not sexist. I don't want to be a rapist or whatever. But here you are, Dr. Fedleg, coming full circle because you are literally ripped off. He says ripped off fully. Imagine being like, you're in the colder months. Just because it's cold doesn't mean you got to cover yourself up from head to toe. I mean, you could have a little sweater moment with a cute corduroy, skirt with a little tight moment, right? There's nothing weird about that. But no, you're going to get yoinked off the streets, get kidnapped, be strapped to a table. It has a pillow for your fucking head. But alas, you look up, there's a fucking mirror there, right? As a woman, that's trauma. That's years of trauma. And, you thought you're going to have a little coffee date with your girls with the cute outfit that you have on. And no, your tights are getting ripped off and paint is getting painted onto your legs. What the hell is going on? So it keeps going. How does this keep going? Right? Like, I thought this could have been done. No, there is 20 more paragraphs. I'm not going to read all of this. It's too much. I thought this is a bigger beast than I thought. I thought I could handle this one. But mentally, I cannot because there's so many paragraphs that keep going and going and going. I'm going to scroll down. Please understand that just because I played a part in the birth of this fantasy does not mean I condone sexual assault or rape or anything like that in the real world. That's Jim speaking. So he created this plethora, this huge, like, Hollywood type fucking storyline of Dr. Fedleg, basically a sociopath, trying to fix women like this. What are the frequently asked questions? Why yellow? Somebody asked. In universe, yellow symbolizes happiness and new beginnings, which is what Dr. Fedleg wants his quote-unquote patients to feel after he paints them. Out of the universe, it's just sort of always been that way, despite questioning if another color would work as well. It just never does. Another question, do I have a Simpsons fetish? I get asked this question a lot. I actually never really been into The Simpsons. It's a shame because you'd think it would be the perfect show for me, right? There's a lot. How in the hell did all of this happen? It kind of just happened. I told it to another Ask Reddit thread years ago and people said they subscribed to a whole sub about it. Back then, I just didn't feel like a freak. I didn't want to feel like a freak and be the only one with the fetish. So I created the sub and then added some basic lore to go along with it. Then some questions were asked if I somehow already knew the answers, so I added the lore and a snowball effect began from there. a lot of people were asking what kind of paint color, like what kind of specific shade of yellow, and people were just like, it's standard yellow, but also bumblebee and butter yellow. This is crazy. Like, this guy had a dream when he was a child, and I guess got a boner off of it and decided to create an erotica, but then got ashamed because he was like, what if I was the only one that had this weird yellow leg fetish? But then now it like kind of blew up. I mean, these questions are crazy. To end the podcast, right? Because I didn't expect it to go on this long. How does hair on legs continue to grow through the permanent paint? This is hilarious. It doesn't. The paint contains special properties that almost act as a chemical laser hair removal. Hair will no longer grow on the legs. You know, let me get some of that. If I don't have to ever have, as per my last podcast episode, you know what? Maybe I'll put some of this permanent paint on my legs. Anyways, conclusion, this is all satire. This is one of the weirdest subreddits that I've come across. It feels like a fever dream, right? We're all at the end of the podcast episode and we're just all kind of, I know you guys are going to end this episode, turn it off, continue on with whatever you're doing, and you're just in the back of your head. Did that really happen? Was I lucid dreaming? Is this some sort of weird fuzzy fog of a dream? Like, I feel surreal. Right? That was this week's post, guys. Another deep dive into what the hell am I finding on Reddit. Make sure, if you have the time, to check out my Patreon for the podcast. It is exclusive for members only. I'll be posting members only episodes that are, interesting. It's a lot of, weird side stories, more personal stories, I guess, would be posted on there. A lot of audiobook narrations that I would like to start getting into. And if you became a Patreon to the pod, you'll get a shout out on the show, and I will butter you up on here. So that is linked in the show notes below. If you have crazy stories or just want to be a guest on the show and we can talk about weird, crazy ADHD ramblings, email me at meanelations@gmail.com. And with that, everybody, I hope you all have an amazing week. We got this. Fight the strong fight. And as always, c'est la vie.